All right, welcome back to Bilan and Balam. So as you can see today, we have a different format, but we're always the same. I'm Maxime here with Ross, our legal expert, and today we're actually starting a new series focusing on future-proof your wealth. So where we'll be tackling, plenty of crucial topics around protecting your wealth and all the effective manner for you entrepreneurs out there. And so today, of course, we'll cover strategies like trust, legal entities, and really how to keep your assets safe and make sure that they're growing. So if you're an entrepreneur, make sure that you're paying attention. So hello again, Ross. How are you today?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Maxime. Yeah, exactly. I think we've thought about what's the essence of really what we do, isn't it, here at Balham Law? And it really is about helping people, as we call it, future-proofing their wealth. And we see that from in terms of asset protection. We see that in high level and generational wealth management and investing, and we see that in tax optimization and re-domiciling yourself, your family, and your business potentially on where they need to go. And then we also finally see it in what we call estate planning or succession or like capital distribution, which is really making sure your wealth goes in the future where you want it to go. So yeah, we're going to do some videos focused on that.
Amazing. I think there's such a wide subject that the idea of this series is really to go down in depth to really make sure that all the concepts are well understood by everyone, and that's why it'll be a different format. We won't go over the news, but it will be more focused around all those strategies. So Ross, can you maybe start simply by explaining in your eyes what is asset protection and why is it so important for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I mean, asset protection gets sort of flung around, doesn't it? And I think the first thing that people think about is sort of Cook Islands Trust. Actually, it's that's the I need this, I need that, and where actually it's kind of a bit more of a complex, multifaceted strategy that you need to have in place, and there's more than one area that you need to tighten up to make it work. In my mind, there's three areas. I sort of call it the holy trinity of asset protection, which is, yes, you are looking at things like using a jurisdiction such as the Cook Islands to wrap your assets. So you're looking to have your assets tied in a jurisdiction such as the Cook Islands or the Bahamas or Nevis. Why? Because they have very low statute limitation periods. So somebody looking to bring a claim in those jurisdictions, which they might have to if your assets are wrapped by them, is normally limited to something like 1 or 2 years. So, and after that period, forget it. The courts in those jurisdictions won't look at any case. So that's the first part. The second part is, can a foreign judgment be enforced in that jurisdiction? So you need to be very careful. So, for example, a judgment in Hong Kong will quite possibly be very easily enforced in Singapore, if not automatically. So matrimonial, so divorce judgments, for example, in English courts are quite often just automatically enforced in Singapore. So you'd look at that as well. And then the third part of asset protection is where the assets are. So you can create all these fancy structures, but if your legal threat is, say, in America, and you've got all your assets in a New York apartment, then all of the rest of it doesn't really matter. So it's also where you're placing the assets. So those are the three parts, and obviously that's quite complex to put together. It needs to be done with the right intentions and that as well. If you're doing it to outright defraud someone, then it's probably not going to work. If you realize that you're about to have a divorce tomorrow and you're rushing around trying to set something up now, it's probably too late. So it's something more that you do as part of your greater life planning. You put it in place gently over time. And as we've seen in previous videos, Maxime, haven't we? I think it was the Jean-Michel Jarre case. Even the French courts there respected structuring when it was done in light of a broader estate plans. So that's one of the key things as well, is something that you've done with foresight and as part of a bigger legal plan.
100%. I think you made it very clear. It's all about planning. We don't want to rush things, and this is why it's something that is not only for you, but as well for your future generation. Like we've seen it in our previous videos as well. Like it's something that you want to plan and make sure to do it with experts. Now, if we go kind of a little bit more into the nitty-gritty details, like is there any special structure, legal entities that are usually used in those different jurisdictions?
Yeah, so I mean, your ultimate protection is using a Cook Islands trust. Actually, it is true that is the best one. But normally, what you do is pair that with like a Swiss bank account.
Hmm.
So that's really the ultimate structure. A Cook Islands trust. Normally, have a Cook Islands LLC underneath, and then that would hold a bank account in Switzerland, and yeah, that's pretty secure. There is actually quite a decent bank in the Cook Islands itself, actually, which has very good online banking, which you need because you're not going to be going and visiting the Cook Islands and with the time zone differences. But so obviously that would actually be putting your assets actually in the Cook Islands itself, which is super well protected then. But the alternative to that is to use a Swiss bank account because it's going to be very difficult for somebody to come with some sort of judgment or claim in Switzerland. First of all, the Swiss courts would kind of be looking and saying, hey, there's a Cook Islands element here as well. Then you're going to be forced to perhaps deal in the Cook Islands. So, you're not going to get much change out of $500,000 to engage with those legal systems, and you're probably going to get pushed away during that period. And then the 1 year timeline would probably pass as well in the Cook Islands. So that's really the ultimate structure that a lot of high net worths are doing at the moment.
It makes sense. So you were mentioning putting your assets in the Cook Islands. Maybe can we dive a little bit more into residency? Like, is it important to very wisely choose where you're resident from an asset protection way of thinking?
Yeah, well, really, what you're talking about is what jurisdiction has sort of standing to rule over your affairs. That's the key here. And if you've got a jurisdiction that might not see things the way you wish them to be seen, and whether that's from a nefarious or whatever point of view, you don't want that court involved in your life and your affairs. So
Makes sense.
from that point of view, a court will look at many things to determine whether it has jurisdiction over your affairs. You need to be very careful and work with lawyers such as ourselves when you're in this type of world, because you don't want to be doing things, suggesting things, writing things that might give a jurisdiction some sense that they can have jurisdiction over to you. So yeah, if you've got a golf club membership, or you've got a business, or you live in that jurisdiction, etc., the more ties you've got to it, the more likely the court is to determine that they've got jurisdiction. And in a lot of litigations, most of the time and money, quite often, is spent at the start fighting over which jurisdiction has the top authority to determine the case, because the lawyers know that battle after that, not the case is won or lost quite often, right?
Makes sense.
Yeah. So the same with asset protection, and if most of your life is in the UK, but your biggest litigation threat is in America, and you don't want Americans somehow having standing on that, then you would probably say, right, we need to be really in this other jurisdiction here where we know that the court system is going to stand up for us and that sort of thing.
All right. And so at the beginning of this conversation, you mentioned Cook Island Trust, LLCs. Can you maybe go a little bit more in details, like what is the role of each of those entities?
Yeah, I mean that's probably your sort of best plain vanilla structure. There are even way more complex strategies you can use. For example, people even spend $1 million on creating like a Luxembourg fund that's registered on a stock exchange with an ISIN number, right? And or creating this whole business that really, yes, it might be a business, yes, it might be a genuine fund, but really its objective is asset protection, and it might be like a listed fund with many investors and things like that, but it also owns your private jet, people, things like that, right? So the amount of money that goes into this, I mean, it's worth saying that you have to do asset protection. If you've got any level of wealth in this world, you're going to have a divorce, you're going to have a creditor, you're going to have the tax authority come after you, right? So you do need to have an asset protection plan ongoing throughout your life if you're someone that's been successful and has a lot of assets. And we live in a more connected, more litigious world, so you have to do this and put a budget towards that. So, but yes, in terms of structures, you'd have a Cook Islands LLC, which must have, Cook Islands Trust, which must have a Cook Islands trustee. That's an important point as well. They should have the authority to properly run that trust. So you shouldn't be running it, because somebody could argue, wow, yeah, there's a trust, but really it's fake. You're running this. So you need a properly empowered trustee. You need a very carefully drafted trust deed, which is something we help with. But sometimes there is an LLC as well, because quite often it's difficult for the Cook Islands to deal with assets, mainly given the time zone differences. Quite often you might have it in a company. In some way, the company also just adds like another layer of complexity. Somebody trying to attack
protection.
it. Yeah. In the modern world, that can be a bad thing though, as well. You don't want to have loads of layers, because to a lot of banks and regulatory authorities, they just see that as something very suspicious. Why would you? People in the old days used to have maybe like 5 BVI company layers. And in the old days, it was much easier to run these companies. Nowadays, you have a lot of reporting, accounting to do. If you've got a lot of entities, it can just be a headache. But yeah, it does depend on the case as well. Kind of what the worry is. Some people are just very, very, very worried, and they want the complexity, and they're prepared to spend the money on it. So we can create that if needed.
It makes sense. And so, how can someone actually ensure that they still have access to their assets while they're being protected in those LLC, in those trusts? Can you maybe go over the 3 parts that are making this trust, like the trustee, the settlor, the beneficiary? Maybe that would be interesting to dive in.
Yeah, so normally it's the current owner of the assets will settle the trust. That can be a negative thing, but it's a little bit hard to get around unless you're prepared to really give your assets to somebody else first, and then at a later date maybe they decide to create a trust. You can't just gift it to somebody and the next day they create a trust. That would be seen through. But we do see a lot of cases where we have this apparently very rich mother-in-law. We used to always laugh with the sort of Russian clients. The sort of Russian mother-in-law apparently seemed to own a big trading company somewhere, and she would create a trust. But so normally it's the person that has the assets would create the trust. That does create reporting obligations on them, and that is often one reason why you would move to a different jurisdiction now, actually, because the reporting under common reporting standards, there will be reports done on the settlor. So you might actually need to move somewhere neutral first, where you don't mind information going. So, for example, if you've moved to the Bahamas or you've moved to Singapore, maybe you don't care about those jurisdictions receiving reports about your Cook Islands trust, but you don't want, say, the UK, or or maybe you live somewhere like Latin America where it's not so much about tax, it's more about security. You don't want a Mexican tax authority finding out about your money because the next minute your children's been kidnapped or something like that. It does happen. So that would be the thing around the settlor there. So that's a lot of thinking and talking about there. And then obviously a trust has beneficiaries. So your family members would normally be listed as potential beneficiaries that could benefit in the future. And then in terms of running it, the Cook Islands trustee could be left alone to run it, but you can appoint people. So you can, Bantam Law, we get involved in helping people run their trusts. Quite often at the start, we do appoint the settlor. So there might be a bank account in Switzerland, and we might give them a power of attorney to manage that. That does sort of weaken the asset protection, which is a very basic equation. The more control, the less protection. And it's difficult for people because they're trying to balance that, right? They don't want to, there's one thing setting asset protection stuff up, but then you give away all control and somebody runs away with the money. That didn't really work, right? So there's a balance to be struck, and normally that's done by building trust up over time. So at the start, maybe look, let's set this up, but I'll still manage the money as the owner of the assets, original owner of the assets, and then over time I'll maybe delegate it out and step away. So a lot of these things you need to do gently. You need to see that it's working. You're creating these complex systems. You kind of need a bit of a process for it all and see what works and what doesn't, and then it kind of beds in over time, and then everybody is doing their little part and it's working well.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it very clearly. Like it's a process that takes time. That's why you need to think about it before. You need the planning, and then the trust on both aspects. From the entity side, like setting up a trust is crucial, but as well trusting the partners that you're working with, and making sure that everything is running as you have planned it. I think before we continue, maybe we take a quick break to mention the global Reconnaissance report that we're building up here at Bellon Law. And so if you're serious about preserving and passing on wealth, this report is your ultimate guide. So it covers everything from setting up trust to preparing your heirs for their wealth management. So feel free to head out to the link that will be in the description, and we'll help you to start future-proofing your legacy today.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a highly tailored report that considers what I think is absolutely everything that you need to worry about. That's really what it's about. It's a report that we do that has a process and a theory behind it, but it's very personalized to you, and that will quite often be the first time in your life that you've scoped out all the things that you need to worry about. And from that, you'll know what you need to focus on, but also you'll know what you don't need to worry about as well. So you can relax a bit on a lot of things that you might be worrying about that are unnecessary. We've created this diagnostic, this methodology, and yeah, if it sounds like something you'd be interested in, we've got a bit of a waiting list to that sign up to, and we'll keep you updated, and can slot you in for a session on how to have that completed.
100%. And now, Ross, maybe to close up this episode, can we talk a little bit about the common mistakes that people do when planning for their generational wealth?
Yeah, the main thing is that they sort of pay lip service to these structures. So they set these structures up, all the legal stuff, the paperwork and the entities, but then they just continue to run it as if it was their own money. And I think on our channel we've got the interesting case of Zhang Lang, haven't we? The Chinese restaurateur, and she got bashed in the court, and you can watch that video. It's very detailed on what happened there. But she was controlling the bank accounts, for example, paying money out to herself. The trustees weren't really doing anything, and even when the litigation came, the trustee didn't do anything. It was her and her lawyers that defended it, which actually counted against her. And the assets were in the wrong place. She had all her assets in Singapore, and the private equity company that was attacking her, they were very clever. They went and get a judgment in China first, because then they knew on the back of that they get a judgment in Hong Kong, and then they knew on the back of that they get a Hong Kong in Singapore. So the lawyers, smart litigation lawyer, will know how to unpack a structure.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, it needs to be done in the round. 5% of things of potential threats you can probably deter with some clever planning that's respected, I would say, and people respect it. Of course, if you've got a big litigation firm coming after you, they can get you thrown in jail in another jurisdiction for some other reason and things like that. And that's one thing I talk about in another video, is you almost need to decide at the start as well, how willing are you to stand behind this?
Mm-hmm.
Are you prepared to get thrown in court, in jail? Because the structure might work, but they might be able to attack you for other reasons in another jurisdiction, right? And if you're in a really, really serious litigation game, I think you need a little bit of foresight in that. How far am I prepared to go? Am I prepared to rot in jail, but the money can't be touched because it's in the trust, or am I, at some point, do I fold and open the trust up and hand the money over and give up? And you can actually write that, by the way, in the trust deed. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
at what point should the trustee as well? The trustee needs a bit of guidance on that as well. When should they give up?
Yeah,
and that's another case that we do have done a video about, the Anderson case, where the client was like, "Look, I'm in jail. Hand the money over," and the trustee was like, "No."
It wasn't written on the trust deed.
It was written on the trust deed. That's what they're like. You paid us to do this, and we've got an equal duty. We'd be negligent and breach of trust if we didn't let you rot in jail and protect the assets. So that's quite interesting as well.
100%. I mean, there's so many things that you need to think about, and I think it goes back to working with experts, taking the time to prepare, and really the key takeaway, I think, for asset protection, that is not just for the ultra wealthy. It's for everyone, and it's a critical part of any wealth management strategies. And would it be through trust, LLCs, or all these international strategies? I think that protecting your assets really ensures that what you've worked hard before is actually protected for you in the future, but as well for the future generations, and protected from all those potential and unforeseen legal issues.
Yeah,
So
you see this if you read stories about people in World War II, and obviously a lot of people in Europe ended up in concentration camps and things like that, and not only lost their assets, but the whole family was wiped out. But there are a lot of stories from that period where people kind of had a bit of an inkling of what was about to happen, and they were moving their assets out to other jurisdictions. They were putting it in different bank accounts. They were moving family members out. Your stories where still half the family perished, but the family did continue in another jurisdiction because there were some members that got out, and there was the wealth there and the networks to continue, right? So, I talk a lot about like what I call lifeboat funds. So even if you've got, all your money in America or Canada or somewhere like that, nothing wrong with putting $1 million in a bank account in the Bahamas and putting a Bahamas trust around it, even if it's fully declared to the tax authorities and you're paying tax on it. And that might bring you peace of mind. You're like, I'm all up straight with the tax authorities. But I have a pot somewhere that if everything goes to pieces, there is $1 million that the family can restart, can move, or that can fund restarting somewhere else, And I feel a little bit like, are we living in those times again?
Could be.
You read how World War II started, and it looks a lot how World War III is about to start. So, I think those sort of lifeboat fund philosophies are a good idea, even if it is, fully transparent.
Great advice, Ross. I think it's all about being prepared for the unexpected, and making sure that you're protected in the long run.
Optionality. That's what the families that really succeed, they create optionality to themselves.
100%. Well, I think that I don't want to take away anything else that from this keyword optionality. I think it really wraps up today's episodes of Bill and Bellum. And like I mentioned at the beginning, it was part of the Future Proof Your Wealth series. So we hope that you found this discussion around asset protection interesting and helpful. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and feel free to share this episode with your network. So whoever might be in a situation where they need asset protecting, the global Reconnaissance report on one hand is there for you, but as well, here the team at Bellum Law. So yeah, that's it for me. Any closing remark, Ross?
No, I think we covered a lot there. So yeah, look forward to chatting with you next time, Maxime.
Amazing. All right. Thank you, team. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye. Ciao.